This is a video to demonstrate some of the exercises that are very similar to those found on assignment number 5, Simple Meter Part 2. During the video, we're going to take a look at some adding bar lines to some rhythmic passages. We will also look at how to identify the time signature or the meter given a rhythmic passage. And then we'll also look at notating some of the B means given some rhythms in a meter. Okay, first of all here, we're adding bar lines. So in order to do this correctly, you have to make sure that you understand what the time signature is saying before you can begin. So 3/4 time, it says triple meter, right? In other words, there are 3 beats per measure. That top number tells you how many beats there are in the measure. The bottom number indicates what note value gets the beat. So in this case, we're saying the quarter is the beat. So in 3/4 time, you should have 3/4 notes or the equivalent of 3/4 notes in every measure. So here we go. This is beat 1. These 2 notes together form beat 2. Notice how they're beamed together, by the way. Most 8th notes and 16th notes that fall under the same beat will be beamed together. And then here's the 3rd quarter note. And then you need a bar line. So here's beat 1, here's beat 2, and there's beat 3. Now in 3/4 time, a half note gets 2 counts. So this is beats 1 and 2, and here's the 3rd beat. Bar line. Here's beat 1. 2 8th notes equal a quarter, so that's the 2nd beat. And then remember 4 16th notes equal 1/4, and that's your 3rd beat. And then bar line. Okay, and then this dotted half note fills up the entire measure. When you have a dot on a value, it equals the note value without the dot plus half of that note value. So in other words, a dotted half note is a half note plus a quarter. Or another way to think about it is it equals 3/4. The same time that it takes to perform 3/4 notes. So this equals 1, 2, and 3. Okay, let's take a look at the next example in 4/4. Well, the 4 is still the bottom, so the quarter note is still getting the beat. But now the difference is that we have 4 beats per measure. This is a quadruple meter. So just like before, we're going to count quarter notes. So here's 1, 2, here's 3, and there's 4. 2 8th notes equal 1/4 note, so that's beat 1. Here's beat 2, and then a half note is 2 quarter notes, so beats 3 and 4, bar line. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the whole note gets 4 counts. The next example is in 2/2. So remember, before you attempt writing the bar lines in, make sure you look at the time signature and really understand what it's telling you. So the 2 on top is duple, in other words, 2 beats per measure. The bottom number tells you what value gets the beat. So in this time, with the 2 in the bottom, in this case with the 2 in the bottom, the half note is the beat. So in 2/2 time, you want the equivalent of 2 half notes per measure. So here is half note 1, here's half note 2, bar line. This is beat 1 and this is beat 2. 2/4 equals 1 half note. That's beat 1. And this would be beat 2. Remember, it's not possible to beam together quarter notes, only 8th notes and 16th notes. Here's 1. That's 2. Here's beat 1. Now 4 8th notes equals 1 half note. So these 4 8th notes together equals 1 half note. Bar line. And then it's a little bit faded out here, but there's a double bar line at the end. And this is 1 and 2. This is what the passage in 2/2 would sound like. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay, and then to finish up the bar line section of this demonstration video, let's take a look at this example in 3/8 time. Just making these a little darker so you can see them. Okay, 3/8. So the top number tells you how many beats. So there are 3 beats per measure. And the bottom number tells you what gets the beat. So in this case, the 8th note equals the beat. So in 3/8 time, we want the equivalent of 3/8 notes. A quarter note is 2/8 notes. So here we have beats 1 and 2, and this is beat 3. Here's beat 1. 2 16th notes equals 1/8 note. That's beat 2. And here's beat 3. This is an 8th rest. And then remember, the quarter note gets 2 8th notes. So 1, 2, 3, bar line. Here's a dotted quarter note. The dotted quarter note, remember, means the value without the dot plus half of that value. So it's like 1.5 times the value of the note with a dot. So a dotted quarter equals a quarter plus an 8th, or 1, 2, 3/8 notes. So that actually fills up a whole measure, because this is the same as 3/8 notes. It fills up the same amount of time as 3/8 notes. 1, 2, 2 16th notes would be beat 3. And then this is 1, 2. Here's your third beat. This is a quarter rest, which gets 2 beats of silence. And then here's beat 3. All right, in this section of the video, we're going to take a look at some passages, some rhythmic passages, and try to figure out what is the best time signature for those rhythmic passages. Now, when you're looking at these examples, the first thing that you want to think about is what note value is getting the beat. So you really want to figure out what it is that's getting the beat. Then from there, you can figure out how many beats there are. Now, one of the things that will really help you to identifying what it is that's getting the beat, what note value or what duration is getting the beat, is looking at how things are beamed together. For example, in the first passage, we can see 2 8th notes that are beamed together, but not 4, just 2. So it looks like they're beamed under a quarter note of time. That's a huge clue. And then in the second passage, we can see that there are 2 16th notes beamed together, but notice these are not beamed to the next 8th note. These are beamed together under an 8th note only, not a quarter note. So again, that is a pretty good clue in that passage. In the third rhythmic passage, you're not seeing anything beamed together, so there's really not a clue in regards to the beamings, but you might just glance at it and speculate that the half note is getting the beat. Perhaps the whole note, but that's kind of rare, so it really looks like the half note's getting the beat in this passage. But anyways, let's start with number 1. So first step, ask yourself, what note value is getting the beat? So in this passage, I really see 4 quarter notes. Here's 1, 2. These 2 together are a quarter, and these 2 together are another quarter. You don't have to start with the first measure. You can look, this measure had the biggest clues for me, so that's why I started with that measure. And then if you go back, here's 1, 2, 3, 4. So I can see that there are 4 quarter notes per measure, or the equivalent of. 4, 4 is the best answer here. So remember, the top number tells you how many beats are there, and the bottom number tells you what gets the beat. So in this case, 4 quarter notes per measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. or 4 beats per measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. Another way that you can notate 4/4, by the way, is common time, which looks like this. So it's such a common time signature that 4/4 is sometimes notated as the C right here, which means the same as 4/4. It's called common time. Cut time, by the way, looks like this. Cut time is the same as 2/2, whereas common time is the same as 4/4. Cut time is used for marches and music of that type. The next passage, again, it looks like there are 2/16 beamed together under 1/8 note, and then eighth notes that are not beamed together. So to me, it looks like perhaps the eighth note is getting the beat. Right, this would be beat 1, beat 2, beat 3. Here's 1, 2, that's 2 eighth notes, and here's beat 3. And then the dot, anytime you have a dot on a note value, basically that tells you to take the note value by itself plus half of itself. In other words, 1.5 times that value. So you take the value without the dot, which is a quarter, plus half of the value. So a quarter plus an eighth, or 1, 2, 3 eighth notes. So it would actually be the same as 3 eighth notes as well. Occupies at the same time as 3 eighth notes. If that's the case, then I know that this would get 3 eighth notes and fill up the entire measure. So 3/8 looks good for this one. There are 3 beats per measure, and the eighth note gets the beat. And again, the way that things are beamed together is really a good indicator of what the time signature might be, because it really tells you what is getting the beat, how things are connected or beamed together. Great clue to look at. This last passage, it's kind of weird to see 2 whole notes in the same measure. But if you look at this measure, this is a half rest, half note. These 2 together would be a half note of time, and then a 4th half note. So it's like 4 half notes per measure. Right? This would be beat 2. Here's 3, 4. 2 half notes in 1 whole. Right? So this would be the equivalent of 2 half notes and 2 more half notes, or 4 half notes. So I'm going to go with 4/2 time. And again, that tells me there are 4 half notes per measure, 4 beats per measure, and the half note gets the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is what that passage would sound like, by the way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, in the last part of this demonstration video, we're going to take a look at some note values that are in a time signature, but they're not beamed together correctly. Now, when you beam together note values, you want to beam or connect together note values that are under the same beat. So that's referred to as beam with the beat. So what I like to do in this passage is, first of all, look at the time signature, really identify what's going on. So you can see that 2 means 2 beats per measure, and the 4 means the quarter note is the beat. So there are 2 quarter notes per measure, or the equivalent of 2 quarter notes per measure. And what I like to do is just go through and circle how many things I should beam together. So beam on the beat, beam together values that fall under the same beat, if possible. You can only beam together values that have a flag, though, so only eighth notes and 16th notes and 32nds and 64ths and so on. You can't beam together quarters, half notes, or whole notes. So here we have 2 eighth notes. That equals 1 quarter. That's beat 1. Here's half of the second beat, and then these 2 values is the second half of the second beat. So remember, in a quarter note, there are 2 eighth notes, or 4/16 notes, or possibly in this case, 1/8 note plus 2/16. Remember that this equals 2/16. So 1, 2, 3, 4/16 notes. So when I go and beam it, I want to make sure that I have these beamed together properly. So here is beat 1, and then here is beat 2. Now notice when I beam, that right now is an 8th note because one beam is an 8th note, but these two values are 16th notes, so I want to make sure that I have a 16th note beam across as well. So this is now 8th note, 8th note, 8th note, 2/16, but notice how I beam them so I can see where beat 1 is, and I can see where beat 2 is. The beats are a quarter note here. All right, now we have this dotted 8th note value, which is a little tricky. The dotted 8th note, remember, is the same as the value without the dot plus half of itself. So it actually equals an 8th note plus a 16th, which is the same as 3/16 notes. So if this is 3/16 notes, that's the fourth one. That's 1/4 note of time. Here's the second quarter note. When you beam this together, it looks like this. Put the dot on the 8th note, and then the 16th goes only a little ways across. Don't go all the way across because now we have 8th note here, and then this is a 16th. This is a very typical figure, dotted 8th, 16th note. Okay, so here's the music that's not beamed together properly, and then here's the music beamed so that you can see where the beats lie. The next example is in 3/4, so still the quarter note is getting the beat, but this time there are 3 beats per measure. So this is beat 1 by itself. 2 8th notes equal beat 2, and then 4/16 equal another quarter note. So here's 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4/16. Remember this would get 2/16. Here's your third and your fourth. So this together is one beat. Here's beat 2, and that's beat 3. So here we go, write it. You can't do anything to improve the quarter, but we can have the 2 8ths beamed together, and then we'll beam the 4/16. Remember, 8th note goes all the way across, and then these two are 16th notes, so the second beam crosses both of them. And then 2 8th notes. Ran out of space here a little bit, but that last quarter note I can fit it in. And the last 2 passages, let's take a look at these as well. 2/4 times, so 2 beats per measure. The quarter note is still getting the beat. That bottom number tells me that. So here's an 8th rest plus 2/16 would be 1 beat. This is equivalent to 2/16 notes. So here's 3 and 4. 4/16 equal 1/4. Here's beat 2. 1. And we saw this figure up here. Dotted 8/16 equals 1/4. Now, it's a little tricky, but you usually don't beam with the rest. So you would just do something like this. Sometimes you do see this in music notation. So it kind of makes it look like it's connected with the 8th note, but that's not 100% standard. So you can either use this or leave it off. And then here's a second beat. 8th and 2/16. And then dotted 8/16. So here's the dot. By the way, with dots, if the note head is on a line, you just want the dot to go right above. If the note head is in a space, say like we did something like this. If the note head was in a space and it had a dot, then you would just put the dot right in the space where it is. But if it's on a line, then you just write the dot right above the line. Okay, so here's 1, 2, 1, 2. What does this sound like? Well, it goes 1, 2, 1, and 2, and 1. Again, it goes 1, 2, 1, 2. And you won't be required to clap rhythms for a grade for this class. We'll do some clapping together, but that is not a part of the class. Okay, 4/4, 4 beats per measure. Quarter note gets the beat. So here's beat 1, here's beat 2, here's beat 3, right? The equivalent of 4/16. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then 2/8 notes, that's beat 4. This is 1 and 2. Here's beat 3, and then here's beat 4. So sometimes you can't make any improvements, but then the beams, you want to make sure that you're beaming together under the beat where applicable. Could have left myself a little more space here. And then half note, 2/8, and 2/8. Now sometimes in 4/4 time, you'll actually see 4/8 notes beamed together because it's such a common figure, such a common thing to hear in 4/4 time. So either one of these is actually acceptable. But this one goes along with the rules that I was stating earlier, and that is when you're beaming note values together, you should beam them together so they are under the beats. So here's beat 3 and here's beat 4. This one actually goes across beats 3 and 4. But again, that happens quite a bit in 4/4 time, so sometimes you will see that beamed that way in 4/4 time. Here's beat 1, here's beat 2, 3, all this together is under beat 3, that's why it's beamed together. And then 4, again, you don't usually beam a rest to note values, so we really can't improve this very much. All right, so that was a demonstration on how to beam passages together in 2/4, 4/4, and 3/4.